Want to have your SEO questions answered live? At SEOtraining.com, we offer our members monthly Q&A calls with the father of SEO himself, Bruce Clay. In this series, we are going to share some of the SEO questions that have come in from our members during our live recordings. So if you want to participate and ask your questions to Bruce in our next call, sign up to become a member today at SEOtraining.com. Enjoy. So we got some questions here, and let's go ahead and jump into this. All right, so Bruce, first question. How are smaller companies supposed to compete with larger companies that have immense marketing budgets and SEO teams?
Wow, that's a start with an easy question. Why don't you? There's several ways that you do it. Because somebody has a large team doesn't mean they're good. So let's start and understand that many times large companies sometimes hire cheap and not that much in the way of experience, and they haven't seen the situation before. They're not, grade A experts. And so in the case of that, sometimes all it takes is the right win to beat them. So the way to compete is to outcompete. And I think we've all seen the video about these, I think it was 2 or 3 soccer players that took on an army of high schoolers or something, and they just ran right through them. Professional basketball players can beat a high school team. Pros can beat amateurs at golf or any other kind of a sport. It's just that when you are on the top of your game and you are an expert at what you're doing, you're very competitive and better able to beat people. So the question, which I interpret to be, this company has resources, how do I beat them? It isn't the size of the resource necessarily, it's the quality of the resource. And that you can beat them with fewer resources if they're better. That's really the game. And therein lies a big part of the problem that everybody has, that, they've got 8 people, they can outrun me. They're faster than me. They are able to accomplish changes faster than me. But if they're not the right changes, it doesn't matter how fast they are, it's just going to be noise. And so the only real question would be, are you able to hire an expert? Are you able to outperform the amateurs? Now, not every large company hires amateurs. Some of them pay a lot of money and they have the ability to pick up senior staff, but that doesn't mean that staff is going to necessarily succeed. Now, having said all of that, you are right. It is often much more difficult for a small company to compete against a very large company. Where you have some advantage is that often a small company is regional and a large company is national, and they don't have the ability to compete as effectively at a regional level. Sometimes the infrastructure of their website, right? They're running on a very old, sometimes, content management system or a shopping cart system, and they can't implement very rapidly, or they can't implement without breaking something. So don't assume because it's a large company that they're agile. Don't assume that they can make a change on a dime, right? They can't pivot as rapidly as a modern technology site. So sometimes your advantage is that you are small and that you can implement things faster than a larger dinosaur, right? You can't turn an aircraft carrier that fast sometimes. A tugboat can turn on a dime. So just understand, these are all the advantages you might have. Our companies that are our clients, we see this all the time. They take on Amazon or Best Buy or some other kind of company, software company, service companies. They do it all the time. there's no such thing as an impossible word. You just have to keep going. And our approach is, let's not worry about how big they are. Let's worry about how dumb they are or how fast we can move and they can't. And that helps every small business be competitive.
Gotcha. Okay, great. And also just to note too, as I can see people that are attending, we have a lot of familiar names here that we would probably recognize, Bruce. A lot of team members from our international offices and also here locally here in the States. This is for everybody too. So if you do work for us, I mean, we believe in the philosophy that we're always still learning. So if you are here working for us, feel free to ask your question to Bruce directly. This is a good opportunity for that. So don't be shy, especially you, Bonnie. I see you, Bonnie, on there. But yeah, all right. So we'll go ahead and jump into another question here. All right, we have this, Bruce. Are websites that are in certain industries harder to improve than other industries?
Yes. In some industries, they're regulated and you have to go through compliance. And that slows down the process. As soon as you get the lawyers involved, it's a slower process. So yes, it is clearly not all industries are created equal. But it really, to some degree, also relates to the number of competitors that you're going to have in your industry. There are industries that have competitors almost every few blocks. There's a competitor in your industry. Whereas in other industries, you might be one of only 3 people in the whole city. It really depends on what it is you do. So yeah, not all industries are created equal. Just like I just mentioned, a small guy can beat a big guy. In some industries, you can almost set yourself up as sole source. You're the leader in that industry because there's not a lot of competitors in that space. On a local level, that's a lot easier. Yes, I will agree with you. Some of the industries have been around for hundreds of years. They're very, very well funded. There's a lot of money being made. And I think, as everybody knows, if that industry generates a lot of revenue for the people in the industry, it's going to attract competitors. So yeah, I would say definitely unconditionally that industries are different, that if you have the right kind of a product and some degree of exclusivity and a unique selling proposition, and you're doing the right stuff, you can dominate. But yeah, there's a lot of competition out there in a lot of industries. So it will vary quite a bit.
Okay, good to hear. All right, let's move on to the next question. So we have here a question from Gordy. Our WordPress site was designed in 2013 for local tourism and business promotion. We rank high in our region. We are considering a redesign primarily to make the backend more efficient. What else should we be considering for this revision?
Now, I'm going to assume that the platform isn't changing, that WordPress is still going to be WordPress, that perhaps you're modernizing the look and feel. You might want to restructure some of your pages or write more content, combine pages. Those kinds of things will impact your rankings. So you're going to want to be careful not to break something that is ranking. If you have a page that's ranking well and generating a lot of traffic, I would be very, very cautious with that. Don't change any URLs. If you can avoid changing a URL, you're way ahead. The only time to change it is in the event it's in the wrong directory tree. It's not hierarchically connected correctly, in which case you're going to redirect to it. You're going to have to be careful that you're not slicing up your domains. There's a full checklist. We've got a number of posts having to do with migrations and SEO checklists and things like that on our website. If you go to our website and search for checklist on our website, you're going to get a bunch. And those are the things you're going to have to pay attention to. Now, you're all members already, so I'll describe it. We sell something called a block. It's a minimum of 20 hours. So you basically just buy time and materials. Bruce, we want to buy 20 hours. And that way, when you do your migration, you have 20 hours of our time to help make sure you don't do it wrong. So things like that are available. Checklists are available. There's often what you're going to want to do is if you're changing platforms or servers or something like that, you're going to go to Google and search for problems with whatever the platform is and read it. We've had people who go to Salesforce or go to Adobe or go to other very large systems. And if you search for problems with, there's a long history of people who have already described the problems you're going to run into and the solutions. So I would encourage you to use Google, search for issues with migrations or issues with upgrades or issues with this or that would be appropriate to you and your industry, and just check that out against what you're planning on doing, and check it during the development, not just all at the end before you launch, because it's far better to build it in than bolt it on. So I would check it. I would definitely check that. But as I said, we have services that could help you. So consider that.
Okay, great. And just as a refresher too, for those who've kind of been jumping in a little bit later, of course, this is the live Q&A. So if you have a question for Bruce, type it into the Q&A box down below in the Zoom window, and that's where we'll kind of filter through questions. And if you've already asked a question, feel free to ask another one. This is the opportunity here, so feel free to go ahead and jump on that. All right, so let's go ahead and move on to the next question. This is from Bonnie. We all know Bonnie. How long will it take to see increases in traffic, and how do I ensure any increase in traffic converts to sales?
Okay, that's a good question. The answer is about this long. That's how long it'll take. Your mileage may vary. To be precise, and this is similar to a client question that I had, I think about a week ago. To be precise, it's difficult. One, it's a general question, and as I just mentioned, it may vary by industry. However, we usually can see two kinds of things when we start a project. Category one is something is broken, so if we fix it, it's like the floodgates open, and all of your existing content suddenly ranks. So by removing barriers to the spider or penalties or anything like that, by cleaning things up and removing the barriers to ranking, sometimes you rank just within a week, 2 weeks, 4 weeks. Sometimes there's nothing broken, or it certainly is not conspicuous, in which case we have to start running checklists, and we have to start analyzing things like content and tags and links, and what is the spider doing, and are pages being dropped, and how does this really impact, this change impact a ranking change? And then that is the majority of the life cycle of a SEO project. So how long does it take? If there's a barrier and something's broken, it could be weeks to a month or longer, depends on what's broken. If there's nothing broken, then you're purely in a competitive stage, and it is you against the competitors in the arena known as Google. Now, this is something I want to make sure everybody hears me say. I say it often. Your website is not the battle, right? I can fix your website to the best of my ability to fix the battle, to fix the things that are broken there, but I'm not fixing the battle. The battle is at Google against living, breathing algorithm changes and competitor changes. Your website is the weapon I really get to take to that battle. So by sharpening your website and making it the best it can be, I have an advantage then when I go to the battle and start fighting off your competitors and earning the rankings and things like that. So a big part of what is necessary is we can't have errors on your website. I mean, it dulls the knife, right? And if the battle is a gun battle, we really don't want to bring a knife to a gun battle anyhow. If you haven't updated your website in 10 years, you really might need to redesign it. If you haven't paid attention to SEO in 4 years, you really need an audit and to go through and figure out everything that's broken and to fix it. If you have done nothing for your core web vitals, and that's currently being implemented by Google, if you've done nothing for that, you're behind. And that is the website that we are taking to the battle. So how long does it take? Well, under normal circumstances, you're going to see results between 5 and 7 months. More competitive industries creep up. We were able, in a couple years ago, we were able to take Addicting Games from nowhere to #1 for the word games out of 14 billion results. It took 2 years. 2 years. But it's worth almost $1 million a day. I mean, it's a valuable traffic source. So when you go through the process of figuring out how long it takes, it's an issue of, do I have a sharp weapon? Is it its own worst enemy? Am I highly competitive and I'm going to have to change? Is Google changing things all the time, especially for my industry? What's going on? Who am I beating? How hard is it to beat them? Are they well entrenched in doing everything perfectly? Then it's going to take us longer. But I'd say probably 5 plus or minus a couple months is a reasonable guess for medium grade keywords. Head terms take longer and long tail keywords take shorter. And that's basically the way it works.
Cool. All right. Thanks for the question, Bonnie. We'll have a few more of those in a sec. So let's move on to another question here, Bruce. If an article from a publication talks about our company in a negative way, and that article ranks when you type in our company's name, how do we push it off page 1?
Good question. Now I'm going to give you the answer. You may not be able to. Years ago, the fallacy or belief was that if I'm #1, maybe #2, and something derogatory is #3, clearly I have to put enough other sites above #3 to push it down in the list. Now, sometimes that seems appropriate, sometimes. Now, based upon what the property is, sometimes you just buy an ad on that thing and automatically your negative disappears. Basically, it's a bribe scheme. So you're held for ransom until you pay. Sometimes it would be a publication, and that's the best advantage you have. You see, Google's only going to list probably 2 items for any one domain. So if the item being listed is recent and negative, sometimes all you need to do is submit some positive articles to that same publication and link to them. So what you're essentially doing is you're making sure that their best 2 entries are positive, and it'll push automatically the negative entry to #3. In which case it won't appear in the Google search results. So you don't necessarily have to create new domains and stick them in. Sometimes you can go to that domain and either pay the ransom, or you can submit positive articles to that same domain. And the fact that they are more recent and loved with links, they will go to the top of the Google search results, especially for a search for your company name. Now, the best way to do it is to avoid having it happen at all. You can't have different kinds of negative sentiment. And that's really sort of what we're at the core of this. That's what we're talking about, is negative sentiment. Google has artificial intelligence built in, and they know what negative sentiment is. And over time, that'll actually decay your rankings. Not just that they will show up in the rankings, but if there's enough things supporting them around negative sentiment, that negative sentiment will lower your ranking. So it's a decay process, and you have to address it. Many times you get negative sentiment because you haven't paid attention to the Better Business Bureau entries, or the people that write reviews are being negative, or any number of other things. The best way to avoid it is to avoid it. If it's already happened, then you have to figure out a good way to solve it. Now, there are whole companies out there, and that's all they do, is manage your reputation. And yeah, they're specialists, and they have their own tricks besides what I know. And sometimes you just need to hire somebody that is a sentiment reputation management company. And that's the way I would approach it. Sentiment, but I want to make sure everybody understands this. Even if these sites are not powerful enough to rank in the top 10, enough negative sentiment can drag you down. So we have seen sites lose ranking entirely because the Better Business Bureau gave them a bad rating. So pay attention. You can't, once you burn it, it's burned. So just understand how that works.
Interesting. Yeah, actually, I didn't know that one. I was actually curious about that one myself, because we see a lot of that, people that, come in, competitors, slander and stuff like that. And I don't know, maybe it's just a follow-up question that you and I can have later. Like, I don't know if there's like slander or libel, I guess like a libel case against like that. So it's a whole like kind of gray area there, but maybe a conversation for a different time.
And the thing to remember is your reputation isn't just for users. It influences search, right? There was a case, this was a few years back, called Decor My Eyes. And I'll just describe it to everybody quickly. This is a sunglass company, and 1 out of 3 pairs, they sent out either a broken pair or the wrong pair on purpose. And they generally would send them to women. Now, I'm not going to pick on women, but that was just this chauvinist approach to the world. And these people would get a broken pair or the wrong pair, and they would call and say, I got the wrong pair. And the person would say, no, you didn't. And they would say, yes, I did. And they'd get into this argument across email or phone or whatever. And eventually the person said, well, okay, I understand how you feel. Here's a URL of a site you can go and complain about us on. Go there, file your complaint. We'll see what happens. And these people would go to these sites, and he would randomize a whole list of sites. And they would go to the site, issue a complaint, and link to his website. And his rankings went up because he was getting a whole lot of inbound links talking about sunglasses. So his marketing program was negative press because it was real easy for him to convince people to blast him. Now in the Google world, that negative press would eliminate it. But back then, that was before a lot of the AI stuff, the negative press actually supported it. So just negative press is a bad thing. You don't want it.
If you want to join our next Q&A call, be sure to sign up to become a member at SEOtraining.com so you can ask your questions live. As a member, you'll also have access to dozens of hours of training videos as well as our SEO tools and ebooks. SEO is always evolving and you need a way to stay up to date. So if you want to raise your SEO to the next level, be sure to sign up today at SEOtraining.com. Thanks for watching.